When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg, and I'm your host of Yoga Birth Babies. And in this episode, we are going to talk about fitness, weight training, and pregnancy. So if you listen to Yoga Birth Babies, you know I'm a yoga teacher, you know I love movement, but I've also been doing my own weight training for years. And I really believe in the power of strength and support and how it can help pregnancy and birth. So I invited on Gina Conley to have this conversation. Let me tell you a little bit about Gina. She's the founder of MamasteFit, a perinatal fitness trainer, a birth doula, and a mom of 4. She's also the author of Training for Two. Gina provides evidence-based strategies for movement, pelvic health, and birth preparation. And her unique approach combines fitness and birth support, empowering families with the knowledge and strength to navigate this transformative journey. It was a really great conversation. Gina has so much knowledge. Just some of the things we talked about, a little bit about her own 4 births and how they changed as she got more knowledgeable about fitness and training during pregnancy. We also talked about the risks and the benefits of movement and strength training during pregnancy, and then broke down some of the prenatal myths, because there are a lot out there that can make people really fearful of movement and exercise, and it has a lot of benefits to support you throughout your pregnancy. We also talked about one of my favorite topics, the pelvic floor. We went deep into this, into what is the pelvic floor? What are Kegels? Should they be in a fitness routine? And then, of course, debunking some pelvic floor myths. And then another of my favorite topics, we talked about the pelvic biomechanics. So some really fun stuff. You can geek out with me and Gina, where we go deep into understanding how fitness, how strength training can support you during your pregnancy, and how that may help your birth be a little bit more easeful. I'm really excited for you to hear this conversation. Before we get to my talk with Gina, I always love to give updates about what's happening at Prenatal Yoga Center. So really the best way to find out what's happening is to head to our website, prenatalYogaCenter.com. And while you're on there, you may notice some new pictures. We had a really fun photo shoot. So I'm really excited that we refreshed things up and we've got some really great new pictures. So check those out. Head over to our website, check those out. And while you're there, you can check out our schedule for our online classes, our in-studio classes, our workshops, and of course, our teacher training. So all good stuff there. And then the last thing I want to bring up is I want to thank you, because I say this every podcast, and I'm so happy that so many of you are taking me up on this. If you are a guest, or it could be a potential guest, that you think you have a great topic to add to our conversation, so many people are filling out the applications so that I can know these topics and I get to know you. So if you think that you want to add to our conversation, jump to our website, find our application, let me know who you are and what you want to talk about. And if you are not the person to have the conversation, but you have a topic you want me to cover, send an email in so that I can then find a speaker for that topic. You can reach me straight at deb@prenatalYogaCenter.com. All right. I think that is enough about me and what's going on. We're going to take a super quick break. When we come back, please enjoy my conversation with Gina.
Your burger is served, and this is our finest Pepsi Zero Sugar. Its sweet profile perfectly balances the savory notes of your burger.
That is one perfect combination. Burgers deserve Pepsi.
Hey, Gina, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. It's fun. I've watched you on social media. And I'm like, ooh, it'll be fun to chat with you. And I think we have someone in common. I studied with Dr. Sarah Duvall, and I think you did too, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I learned a lot from her. It was a great program. So I think we quite speak the same language. All
Yes.
right, so let's jump in because I'm really excited. So I come from more of a yoga background, but I know you come from more of a fitness background. So I'm really excited to pick your brain. But I guess before we dive into that, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. And how did you find your way to perinatal fitness?
So I actually used to be in the military. When I was pregnant, I was in the army. I had been in it for about 7 years when my husband and I decided that we wanted to start a family. And I ended up transitioning off of active duty when my daughter was born and was just trying to figure out like what I was going to do with all this time that I had because babies are not demanding at all. And I just wanted something that I can do that was a creative outlet for me that I could pour energy to, that I could feel passionate about. Um, Staying at home was like really rewarding. I really love spending time with my baby. I do a lot of my work with my kids around me, but I just wanted something that was like intellectually stimulating. Like babies are not known for their conversation. And so I decided to become a perinatal fitness trainer because it was the phase of life that I was in. I wanted to support other women in the same time frame as me. And I particularly wanted to be able to create a community for myself and within my local community. And so I started working out of a gym that offered personal training services. And I was the one that was primarily doing like the prenatal and postnatal fitness training. And so I just had like a bunch of moms that were coming to work out with me, and they had the opportunity to bring their babies with them, which was a big game changer and something that I typically find to be the deterrent with exercising in the postpartum time frame is it's really hard to go to the gym with your infant and put them someplace. Um, Childcare is sometimes not available to you when your babies are really little. Sometimes they don't start until they're 4 or 6 months. So it could be a good period of time before you can like even get back into a workout routine. And so the gym owner was really welcoming and allowed us to bring our babies and our toddlers into the gym. And we would put them in pack and plays or different areas to kind of help secure them to keep them safe. But it allowed us to, one, have a community. We were able to like work with one another, like normalize things that were happening with each other, like, oh, my baby's seeding, my baby's going through a sleep regression. And so we all just didn't feel quite as alone anymore, which was huge. And it also gave me a really great opportunity to really explore my programming and figure out like what works best for my prenatal clients, what's working best for my postpartum clients, what kind of movements feel good for me and my body, but maybe feel better for somebody in their body or doesn't feel great in most of my clients' body. And so that was something that's really unique about what we've been able to create at MamasteFit is we are creating programs based on what seems to work for a large group of people as opposed to just what worked for me and my body. Because I'm an individual and the way that I approach fitness is maybe different than somebody else. And so by able to explore movements and programming and pairings with our actual in-person clients, we're able to develop programming that was much more comprehensive and supportive of like the population as a whole. After about a year of primarily doing pre and postnatal fitness training, I started working as a birth doula as well. And so I was able to really combine this combination of perinatal fitness training, so working out throughout your pregnancy, exercises that we were doing, understanding what was happening during labor and any sort of issues and trends that I was beginning to notice, and figure out, okay, what else can we be adding into our prenatal program to help somebody prep for labor, to help them move more easily during labor. And then I was also seeing how labor and how birth was impacting the postpartum recovery as well. Like different things can happen during your labor that can make your recovery easier or make your recovery harder. And so once I had that kind of missing piece of like between the pre and the postnatal fitness, it really allowed our program to be so much more comprehensive and streamlined. So I could support someone from conception all the way through their pregnancy, during their labor, and then in the postpartum. And so we have our online programs that support prenatal, postpartum, in addition to our childbirth education. So we provide that streamlined support from conception and beyond. During the time frame, I also made more children all by
I was
myself,
going to
or
say,
not by
how
myself,
many?
but
You have
now
four, is it right?
I have 4 kids now, so I didn't make them by myself. My husband did contribute, but I grew them all by myself. And so now I have 4 kids, and the things that I've been learning along the way have really helped to improve my own prenatal experiences. Like, I feel so much more confident moving my body during my pregnancy. I feel so much more confident, like being patient with the process and the postpartum and building back up and being able to do this not at an expedited pace, like I'm still taking my time and patient with it, but I'm able to get back to feeling more like quote unquote like myself a little bit faster postpartum because I know to be patient in the first part so that I could be more deliberate with the training when I return to fitness. Sorry, I'm about to sneeze. Um, and then with my own labor experiences, I just feel more confident about making choices during my pregnancy to support my birth. I feel more confident in choosing my provider. And these are all things that I've been thankful to learn from my clients and thankful to learn from all this experience. And it's really supported a more positive experience for me during my pregnancies, my birth, and now into motherhood.
Can I jump in and ask a question? I'm so curious. So I only have 2. I could not do 4. I'm very impressed. You have 4. Like my 2 drive me. That's enough. Like I don't have the energy for more. But I learned so much about what worked in my body during my first pregnancy and second. And I had already been doing work in the perinatal world for almost 10 years before I had my first. But one thing I noticed was some of the choices I made while pregnant with my first were detrimental to my birth flow. Things were really tight. And so I made some choices that really helped for my second. Do you feel, I mean, you have 4 different experiences that you learned and saw differences. You're like, oh, I did that in the first pregnancy and this is how that birth went. And then I'm going to try it differently this time. How do you feel that you learned and grew through each pregnancy?
So my first pregnancy was probably the one that was the most different out of the 4, and this was, like, pre-MamasteFit, so I didn't know all the stuff that I know now. That one, for whatever reason, I just really decided to tune into my body, which I think is a huge aspect of prenatal fitness, and I just kind of explored, like, what movements felt good for me, but I had more SI joint pain, so I was a little bit more uncomfortable. I, like, didn't quite know what to do, and so I was mostly just, like, confused, and I was very fearful of movement because there's so much, like, fear mongering and misinformation out there about what is safe to do during pregnancy. Like, you should never lay on your back. No, it's fine to lay on your back. Like, you should never twist. Like, no, you need all the twisting. And there was so much, like, contradictory information out there that it was really hard to feel confident that what I was choosing to do was safe for me and for my baby, or mostly for my baby. I think that's what most of the concern is. And so my first pregnancy, I just felt very, like, scared of, like, movement. I was also, like, very fearful of labor. I grew up believing that labor and birth was, like, the curse on women and that this was gonna be the most painful thing you've ever gone through. And so I was, like, reasonably a little nervous about it. And then towards the end of my pregnancy, I began to feel a little bit more confident that there are people who do decide to do this without medication and without pain meds, and that it's something that's doable, that can be a good experience. And so my first pregnancy was definitely trying to tune in more with myself, but still feeling very confused and, like, nervous about it. And so with my next 3, I definitely found that I, one, felt so much more confident about what was safe for me to do, what was not safe for me to do, and then the importance of really just kind of tuning in and connecting with my body. And what I'm really thankful for is by the time I made it to my second pregnancy, MamasteFit had been around for about 2 to 3 years. And so I had learned so much from, like, the study that I was doing. I had finished my master's program at this point. I was working with tons of in-person clients. And so we had learned so many different modifications that made sense for different movements. I was starting to integrate a lot more of, like, pelvic floor type work. And so I felt really good in my body for my next 3 pregnancies. I was able to overcome pelvic girdle pain. I felt relatively pain free most of the time. As I started to experience new types of ailments and discomforts during pregnancy, I was able to learn different ways to kind of overcome them. That was probably one of the greatest things about having been pregnant 4 times is that I kind of started to experience different things that I maybe wasn't aware of. That I was like, oh, I didn't know that that's what heartburn felt like, or oh, I didn't know that that's what lightning crotch felt like. And so I was able to essentially personally experience what these different issues were, figure out ways in my own body that they made sense. And then it just helped bring more awareness to myself of like, okay, I need to like explore these other issues that other people may be experiencing that maybe I'm not personally experiencing, so that we can figure out what the solutions are for those. And so that was something that I was thankful for with my pregnancies, was like experiencing some of the issues that I could figure out what the solutions were. I also began to feel more confident in what resources were available to me as well, and what types of movements felt good for me within my body. And by my 4th pregnancy, I really felt very confident about pelvic mechanics, about how the pelvic floor was working. And so my labor was actually the fastest of them all. And so at this point, I was like, I really feel like I've really honed in onto what really supports releasing tension within the pelvic floor, in addition to kind of surrendering mentally to the process as well. And I think each pregnancy and each labor has helped me to feel more confident in myself, while also learning how to let go of my ego and be more present and be more willing to surrender to whatever it is that I need, as opposed to what I want or what I expect of myself. And I think that's been something that has kind of happened as well. So not necessarily like a physical thing, but more of like a mindset piece that has shifted as like each pregnancy and each birth has happened, while also continuing to work with our in-person clients, hearing stories from our online clients. And so, yeah, it's been a journey. The first one was probably the hardest, and then they got easier, I felt like, as I went, just based on what I was able to learn and what I was able to experience.
No, that's amazing. I can imagine each one you get more confident, especially by the 4th. You're like, I've done this. I know how to do this. My body knows how to do it. You've gone there. So let's start to jump in with benefits and risks of movement and strength training during pregnancy. I remember being in the gym very, very pregnant, and this one guy is like, "It's so great you're doing that," and I'm like, "Yeah, I felt so strong." So I love weight training. So let's talk about the benefits and the risks.
So I'll start with the risks, or what most folks are like scared of when it comes to exercising during pregnancy, especially when it comes towards strength training. Usually the two main like concerns is this going to impact the length of my pregnancy? So does exercising in the first trimester cause miscarriage? Does exercising in the third trimester cause preterm labor? Is this going to negatively impact my placenta's development? I think there's some myth out there that if you lift a heavy weight, your placenta is going to detach. And the answer to all of that is no. Exercising does not cause miscarriage. It does not cause preterm labor, and it's not going to cause your placenta to detach. So we can feel confident about that. Now, if you don't feel good in your first trimester, like you are incredibly fatigued, you're exhausted, you're super nauseous, like you can't eat, I would say exercising is maybe not something you need to be focusing on right now. Like, let's just survive this trimester, and then we'll restart in the second trimester. The other risk is, does this negatively impact my baby's development? Is this going to, if I exercise, will my muscles suck away all the nutrients and take them from my baby? And the answer is no. Our babies are very resilient. Our body is very smart, and it's going to make sure that our baby receives all of the stuff that it needs. If anything, there's a lot of benefit for exercising both for you and for your baby. And so starting with our baby, because that's where a lot of the risk or the concern is how is this going to impact your baby? With your baby, from exercising, it helps to stimulate their nervous system's development a little bit more. So when they're born, they have improved cognitive function, improved language skills, not at birth, but the first year of life. They have improved motor skills the first year of life. So they may crawl and walk a little bit sooner if that's what you want. If you don't want them to, like, don't exercise, I guess. The other
Or
thing
knock
that we
them
can
down
think,
when they start to try to
yeah,
walk.
just knock them down. That's what we're doing with my 4th right now. Is she's starting to stand up and is thinking about walking, and we just kind of push her over. The other thing is that your baby's also going to be more resilient to stress, and so we've had this controlled stimulus and this controlled exertion throughout pregnancy with exercise and this controlled stress, and your baby baby is kind of adapting to that as well, which I think is really cool. And so they're more tolerant to stresses during pregnancy, the planned stress of labor, and then even in the postpartum. Babies are also going to have more blood volume, which is also going to help to contribute towards that stress resiliency. And so these are like really big deals for our babies. And these are going to be things that are going to be coming from exercising. Another benefit is that exercising, especially in the first half of your pregnancy, is going to help to improve your placenta's function. And so it can potentially make your placenta function better, which is a huge factor in regards to your baby's development and through their growth. When we have issues with the placenta, it could negatively impact your baby's growth. It can also cause complications for you as well. And so if we have a better functioning placenta, we're probably going to have a healthier pregnancy and also a healthier baby. And this is something that exercising can help to contribute towards. And with that, even just going for walks and aerobic activity and just moving your body with intention is beneficial. It doesn't have to be strength training. Now, when it comes to benefits for you, this is where strength training I definitely find is super beneficial. We have a little bit more laxity that happens within our joints. So there's a little bit more movement and displacement that occurs. This is important because we need our pelvis to open up a little bit more during pregnancy and during labor, because human babies have big heads and we want them to fit a little bit more easily through our pelvis. And so our body releases this hormone called relaxin, which helps those joints kind of wiggle and move a little bit more. Um, because of all this extra laxity, and it kind of happens through all the joints within our body, sometimes there can be too much movement or uncontrolled movement that's not well supported by the musculature and the ligaments that are surrounding it. And so this is where strength training can be really beneficial. It's going to help you to be more comfortable during your pregnancy, because pain is not a requirement of pregnancy by any means. And so when we have this strength training, it helps to coordinate the muscles that cross the pelvic joints a little bit better. It helps to coordinate the muscles that are supporting your legs and your ankles. And so it can help to decrease discomfort and improve joint stability. Now, no one's joints are like disconnecting, or like the word like unstable can create some fear. Like the joints are still going to stay together. There's just like a little bit extra movement or uncontrolled movement that can cause discomfort. And we don't want to be uncomfortable during pregnancy. In addition, we have more mass during pregnancy. Even if you don't gain any weight, like your baby weighs something, you have more blood volume, you grew your own placenta, there's going to be extra mass on you, and your center of gravity is going to shift forward. So as your belly grows, we have more like weight to the front side of our body. And so our posture is going to shift. The way that we stabilize and balance is going to shift. And so if we have more strength, we have more muscle mass, we can help to counter that shift and maintain a more upright position, to maintain a better position longer. We have more postural control, and this is also going to help to decrease your discomfort during pregnancy as well. So strength training is incredibly beneficial during pregnancy. There's really not a ton of risk involved with it. You can lift like heavier weights if that's your choice. I would recommend probably no more than like 80% effort levels, just because once you start lifting towards failure or to the point where you need to bail weight, we're probably compromising our form. And because we have a lot of shifts happening within the way that we stabilize, the way we manage pressure, we want to make sure that we're not lifting too heavy where it can compromise our form and potentially increase the risk of injury. But you can absolutely lift weights. I would say like being mindful of like, is there a fall risk involved with this exercise? So like box jumps, for example, like there's a higher likelihood that you may trip during that one. Like if you don't have handstands within your practice, like maybe learning how to handstand during pregnancy is probably not something I would recommend. If it's already been a practice of yours and you're very comfortable in those positions, like it could probably be a fine option. But just being mindful of like, is there a risk for a fall or potentially like a weight falling on me? Like those would be exercises that I would probably avoid. And then also think about what type of movement pattern alterations are going to happen for me to complete this movement. So typically a big one that we see is like Olympic weight lifts with the barbell. Usually you have to kind of swing the weight around your belly to bring the weight to wherever you want. Doing this every once in a while is not a big deal, but if you're doing it for like every single repetition, this is going to alter your bar path and kind of your biomechanics with it, which it's not bad by any means, but in the postpartum, you're going to have to relearn how to lift that weight. And you're probably going to hold on to some poor movement habits, which is just going to be a little bit harder in the postpartum to like kind of rebuild again. So my recommendation during pregnancy is, if you want to continue to lift, it's generally safe to do so. I would focus more on like 70 to 80% effort levels, not 70, 80% of your one rep max, but when you're doing your lift, you feel like you can do a few more reps before your form gets compromised. You're not reaching failure. We're not having to bail the bar. That would be like a good place to be with your lifts. I like to focus a little bit more on like the strength endurance aspect. So lighter weights with higher volume tends to be something that we do within our programming during pregnancy. But again, you can still lift weights. Being mindful of, are there any fall risks or is there any hazards within the facility that I'm lifting in that maybe could potentially make exercise just in general not safe for me? And then also thinking about, how is my form during this? Am I having to alter my form a lot? If so, maybe I need to do some modifications so that one, I can be more comfortable as I'm lifting. I can increase support and stability if needed, and that I'm still moving with really good form without having to compromise a ton. Because again, if you're having to like shift the way that you do a movement, we're going to have to relearn how to do it properly in the postpartum timeframe. So tons of benefits to exercising during pregnancy, and especially for strength training.
Yeah, I did strength training through both my pregnancies. I continue to do it. And I found that because I did strength training, I think it helped me with the healing, especially all that posterior chain stuff. So I'm very happy that you were sharing that. Okay, we're going to talk about breaking some prenatal fitness myths. We're going to take a quick break when we come back because you already shared a couple, like twisting. I remember people getting very nervous about twisting. So we're going to go into that after this break. We'll be right back.
Subtle results, still you, but with fewer lines. Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
Choice Hotels get you more for your money so you can maximize any road trip. Like with the road trippers we see here in their natural habitat, the breakfast area at a Comfort Inn. Here's a dad teaching his son how to make waffles, fluffy golden waffles. There's a mom making sure her daughter eats some fruit to avoid the "I'm hungry" from the back seat. And a sibling standoff over the last muffin. This is the cycle of vacation maximizationing in all its glory. Check into more. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Okay, we are back. Now, I love that you mentioned twisting because years ago, there was, I think her name was, I won't give her full name because that might be nice, but it was a program called Maternal Fitness. And in this program, they said, do not twist. And we twist. We don't twist deep in the belly, but we do twist, especially for the upper back. It feels great. And when I was teaching that, this student looked at me one like, A, I was crazy. But two, when she would try to move, she didn't twist anything. She was like a robot. She would move everything at once and wouldn't really twist. Even like her head, she wouldn't twist. And so I tried to explain to her, I'm like, we do want to twist. We can twist our thoracic. It's great for, back rib mobility. She refused to listen to that. So I would love for you to break down more of these prenatal fitness myths.
So the twisting one is definitely a big one that I have heard of primarily from like yoga teachers.
Well, not
where it's
everyone's
like,
educated. I'm going to say that as yoga teachers.
So it's not every yoga teacher, obviously, but that is where I hear it mostly come from is sometimes from like the yoga realm. Or if it's like you can twist, only open twists. And so with twisting, kind of the concern, again, it's all about the placenta. If you twist too deeply, it'll detach the placenta. That placenta is embedded really well in there. It's like, you can jostle yourself around. It's not going to just fall off. It's not this fragile organ that's attached to the inside of your uterus. When it comes to twisting, like absolutely, like super deep abdominal compression twists are probably not going to be comfortable. It's probably not dangerous, but it's just not going to feel good for you. But our spine needs to move, our hips need to move, and they need to twist to be one, comfortable and functional, and two, to also support our preparation for birth as well. Different types of rotational exercises and movements are really important to create space within our hips and within our pelvis for our baby. And so we can do both closed and open hip positions. Open hip positions would be more of like that warrior two, like knee moving away from the belly. So you have a little bit more of like a groin stretch type of happening. Those stretches are great. Those that a little bit more of that external rotation is going to be really helpful to creating more space, primarily in the top part of your pelvis. And that's going to be complemented typically with some sort of twist within the spine. And the thoracic spine has a great movement capability, especially with rotational movement. And so we need to twist to be comfortable. Like if you try to reach something behind you, like you're sitting in your driver's seat and you try to grab something behind you when you're parked, if you don't twist, like that's really challenging to do. So it's a functional movement that we need to do. And typically, if we're having more like upper back pain or neck pain, it's probably from a lack of mobility. Like maybe we're stuck and it's causing a lot of discomfort in other places that have to kind of pick up the slack. Like your lumbar spine is meant to be more stable. It's not meant to have a ton of rotation. And so if the thoracic spine is really restricted, we're probably going to have more neck pain, more shoulder pain, more lower back pain because other places are kind of picking up the slack. So just simply for your comfort during pregnancy, please twist within your spine. And with any sort of stretching, we're not trying to find our red line. Like we're not trying to go as deep as we can or find our deepest expression or form within each posture. We're stretching to like a place that feels good for us, but not like, again, two extremes. And so twisting is incredibly important. When it comes to the pelvis, though, we especially need twisting even within the spine because it translates to rotation within the pelvis. We need this rotational movement with closed hip positions and open hip positions to help create space in the middle of the pelvis where your baby rotates. Like I said, those open hip positions going to be more of that groin stretch. They open more of like the top half of the pelvis, and this is going to help your baby begin to rotate into the pelvis. But those closed hip positions where your knee or your belly comes more towards the thigh, so really any of those like rotational or revolved lunge type positions are going to be really helpful with more of that closed hip. And again, within reason, if pressing your belly really hard into your thigh doesn't feel good, we're not going to find a super deep twist. Like it's going to be within reason. But we're really thinking about feeling that pelvis rotate internally on the femur. So rotating towards the thigh to feel a little bit more of like this deep glute stretch towards like the tailbone sacral area. And that's going to be incredibly important. One, to releasing tension in the back half of your pelvic floor, where a lot of us hold a little bit more tension, in addition to creating space in the lower part of your pelvis, which is really important for your babies to finish the rotation underneath the pubic bone. And so if we're having like late labor stalls where you're 8 centimeters and you got stuck or you're pushing for a really long time, it could be related to this lower mid pelvis area and a restriction of space. During pregnancy, we tend to favor a little bit more external rotation. So toes pointed out, more of those open hip positions because that's just comfortable for us. Everything's kind of being pulled forward, or our spine is extending a little bit more. We have normal extra curvature in our lower back. And so we tend to find these more open positions just in general. And so if that's all you favor in your practice and in your workouts, we're going to have a very tight back half of our pelvic floor. So twisting, you absolutely should twist, but I wouldn't find like my deepest expression of really any posture, but especially not my deepest of twists, because again, it's just not going to be super comfortable. Another common miss is like the heart rate, like, oh, you need to keep your heart rate under this certain level. Heart rate is really not a great tool to utilize during pregnancy to determine your effort levels because it fluctuates pretty drastically. Our blood volume is doubling during pregnancy. Your blood pressure is like increasing and dropping and increasing. And so there's a lot of shifts happening within the circulatory system. So using your heart rate as your sole tool for your exertion is not always like very reliable. And so rather than focusing on, and so that came from like, there was like a bulletin that came out with ACOG, which is the governing body of obstetrics, where a doctor said, hey, I think the heart rate should be less than this. And then like the next bulletin that came out, he was like, JK, I just made that up. Let's not use that. That didn't make any sense. And so the concern is if your heart rate gets too high, then there's too much exertion happening. It could be harmful for baby, or if your heart rate is too high, your core body temperature increases too much, which can be harmful for baby. But it's not actually based on anything. And rather than focusing on heart rate, let's focus on how you are feeling in your body. So let's tune in a little bit more and use our prenatal workouts as an opportunity to connect more with our body and whatever it is that we're feeling. And so I typically recommend usually like a moderate intensity level for the majority of your workouts throughout pregnancy. So you feel challenged, but you feel like you still got stuff left in the tank. Like you're not completely gassed at the end of your workouts. You feel good though. But it's not like a super easy conversation. Like you couldn't talk the whole time. So trying to find kind of that middle ground can be really helpful with our workouts as opposed to only looking at your heart rate. Because you might find your heart rate's really low, but you feel completely gassed, or it's super high, but you feel like this is really easy effort for me. So we're going to focus on that over just monitoring your heart rate. And because again, you'll find like there'll be certain points in pregnancy where just existing, your heart rate's a little bit more elevated. So if I use that as an exertion tool, it's not super reliable. Those are kind of like the main ones. I've also heard like, don't put your arms over your head.
I had a student say that. She said, my grandmother said my baby will fall out. And I'm like, if it was only so easy.
I know.
Like I was a doula for 10 years. Could you imagine? But like, okay, bring your arms up.
That'd be so much easier. Like forget about all the other moves. Just throw your arms over your head. The one that I've heard was if you put your arms over your head, it'll make your baby like wrap itself up in the umbilical cord. Which I mean, babies are flipping and flopping all over the place. If they are a little bit wrapped up, it's usually not like a problem at all. And I also have heard like if you put your arms overhead, it's not great for you either. The more like realistic side of that is if you are pressing your weight directly overhead and we're stuck in this extended position, we're probably going to have a little bit of a decrease in shoulder mobility and how well our scapula and our shoulder blade can kind of move on our rib cage. If we're in an extended position, it could limit that. And so if we have limited mobility in the shoulder as we're pressing overhead, could potentially cause some you might have to compensate within the rest, like somewhere else in your body as you press overhead. When we press overhead, this is typically where I see more abdominal coning, which is where the center of the abdomen, so kind of that gap of where your six-pack abs would be if you didn't have a huge pregnant belly, that little line right there will kind of push out a little bit more. The reason why this can happen is as your belly grows, the abdominal wall thins and these muscles kind of separate from one another. They're not a single sheet of muscle, they're different muscle bellies. And so the tissue just thins and allows the belly to expand. This is a normal adaptation that needs to happen during pregnancy. During pregnancy, though, when we have increased pressure in the abdominal cavity, because we have this thinned tissue, it's more easily manipulated by pressure. And so if we are in a more extended position as we're pressing weight overhead, and we have to extend a little bit more because we have limited shoulder mobility, this is really going to thin that tissue there. And the way that we're kind of managing like the air or the pressure within our abdominal, there's no air in your abdominal cavity, but the way that we manage the pressure within our abdominal cavity, it's going to push a little bit more into that tissue, and we're probably going to see a little bit more abdominal coning. So again, having this thin tissue is normal during pregnancy. Having diastasis is normal during pregnancy, but we do want to limit the amount of abdominal coning that we have with pressure because it's essentially pushing out on this thin tissue and stretching it, and then it releases after the exercise. So if you have a hair tie that you've been using for like a week, by the end of that week, that hair tie is just like hanging on for its dear life. It's like floppy. It's just kind of because it's been stretched and stretched and stretched so much. So it's really similar to our abdominal wall. If we are constantly stretch with almost every exercise that we do, we're going to potentially have a more severe diastasis postpartum. So if you cone every once in a while, not a huge deal. If you have abdominal coning as you're just sitting and relaxing, that's just the way your belly relaxes, not a big deal. But if you are exerting yourself and that coning is happening from pressure pushing into it and stretching it, and that happens with every single repetition that you do, with every single exercise that you do during your pregnancy, this could be potentially problematic in the postpartum to heal from. Not impossible, just make it a little bit harder. In overhead pressing movements, I tend to see causes this a little bit more because of our postural tendency. We tend to be more extended and it decreases shoulder mobility. And so if you are noticing a lot of coning with overhead movements, we can do an incline press instead. So instead of pressing directly overhead, maybe we press at like a 45-degree angle, either with an incline bench, with some bands. So just change the angle of press so that it's a little bit more achievable with shoulder mobility. We can also add in a little bit more core engagement to help keep that rib cage down as we press overhead. I usually like to pull a band down as I press overhead. So kind of like a counter push and pull can be really helpful. We have like a whole YouTube video on what to do to prevent coning with exercise. So for the listeners, if you just go to YouTube and you type in MamasteFit, how not to cone or coning exercises, there'll be a video that pops up that's like 15 minutes long where I show a lot of different modifications. But that would be kind of like the myth of overhead pressing. But those are kind of like the main ones that I've heard. Oh, also don't lay down flat on your back. You can exercise on your back for short periods of time, and it's not usually problematic, especially in the first 2 trimesters. When you make it to the 3rd trimester, maybe it's probably going to be a little bit more uncomfortable, but again, short periods of time, generally fine. If you're noticing like you feel dizzy or lightheaded, or you just feel uncomfortable flat on your back, don't lay flat on your back. We could do more of an incline, where instead of being like doing a bench press flat on your back, maybe we do an incline press instead, or maybe we do a seated like chest press instead. So we can kind of change the positioning of it so it's more comfortable for you.
So I want to go into also some pelvic floor myths. This is really interesting. So last week when I was teaching a prenatal workshop, I actually had a student ask about the pelvic floor. And first of all, I loved her honesty because she expressed, as I said, okay, we're going to talk about the pelvic floor. She raised her hand. She's like, I don't know what the pelvic floor is. I don't know. Should I be doing Kegels? And then she's like, are hip bridges the same as Kegels? And it just kind of highlighted the confusion and the complete misunderstanding for some about the pelvic floor. So I'd love to jump into that. Let's talk about the pelvic floor, its role in birth, how to prep the pelvic floor. But since we're kind of on this whole debunking of myths, let's also talk about pelvic floor myths. So I just gave you like 5 questions in one.
Yeah. So so let's start with what is the pelvic floor. So the pelvic floor is a sling of musculature that's at the bottom of your pelvis, and it plays like a really big role within our daily life and especially during pregnancy. So the pelvic floor is the bottom of your core canister, so it helps with stabilization of your spine. It helps to manage pressure, which is a key thing to help us maintain our upright position. It's going to help to support our pelvic organs. So if you are pregnant, you have 3 organs. We have our bladder, our uterus, and our rectum that our pelvic floor is supporting. The pelvic floor has sphincter control, so it keeps pee in, it lets pee out, and then also for the back end as well. So those are like 3 like really main roles that it has. It also has a sump pump function, so it helps with lymphatic drainage through or flow through the pelvis. And then it plays a big role during childbirth. It has a sexual function, so it helps with orgasm, and also has to release and let go for birth. I was similar where I also did not know what a pelvic floor was before I had kids. It was, I think, after I gave birth, I was like, what do you mean? What is that? Like, what's a pelvic floor? Because it's not a muscle that you see, and it's not one that you may even be aware of until you're in your childbearing years and you're pregnant and somebody's like, hey, make sure you do your Kegels. So with Kegels, it's important to understand what they are. And so I'm going to start my disclaimer, and maybe this is an unpopular opinion, maybe it's not. I don't think that Kegels are necessary, and I think that they're more detrimental than anything for most folks to do during pregnancy and even in the postpartum. I think there's so much more to the pelvic floor than how tight you can squeeze it. So commonly Kegels are supposed to be how well you can move your pelvic floor over a range of motion. But what I see it commonly advertised as, and what I think most people understand it as, is how tight can I squeeze my pelvic floor? There's a number of things that can contribute towards how well you can move your pelvic floor, such as what is your rib cage position? What is your pelvic position? What position are your hips in? Like, what is your spinal position? Those could all impact how well your pelvic floor can move. And so just how tight you can squeeze it in a stationary position, I don't think is an adequate expression of how strong your pelvic floor is. And tight does not equate strength. And I think that's an important thing to differentiate. During pregnancy, we want a pelvic floor that is strong enough to withstand the additional load. We're all gaining weight during pregnancy. Whether or not you gain a single ounce of additional weight outside of your pregnancy, you will weigh more at the end of your pregnancy. So our pelvic floor has to support that additional load. In addition, the pelvic floor needs to be strong enough to do that. But we don't need a tight pelvic floor to do that. We need a pelvic floor that is responsive. So a pelvic floor that can lengthen with control, that can tighten with control, and that can also find a resting position. Things that are going to really contribute, let's come back to those Kegels. So the Kegels, again, it's just that tightening motion. while the shortening portion of the pelvic floor is an important part of its range of motion, again, we also need it to lengthen and to stretch. For a lot of us, we tend to hold a lot of tightness within our pelvic floor in general. And so, if all you're doing to prepare for birth is to tighten your pelvic floor, it is not going to be helpful for you. It's going to make your pelvic floor very tight, and your baby has to pass through your pelvic floor. A common misconception that I have heard is, oh, well, the pelvic floor pushes your baby out. So you need a strong pelvic floor to push. Your pelvic floor is at the bottom. It would
I
be like,
always laughed at that. I'm like, where are they pushing from? The pelvic, exactly. Pelvic floor's at the bottom.
it would be like tightening your toothpaste cap more to get your toothpaste out. Like that's essentially what it is. So we need to take the cap off of our toothpaste so that the toothpaste can come out, so that your baby can come out. So your pelvic floor does not push your baby out; your uterus does. And with
It yields.
yeah, it just needs to let go. Yeah, your abdominal wall and your your back muscles can help to push the baby out from the sides. But again, if I think about like my tube of toothpaste, I can either push from the top with my uterus, I can squeeze from the sides with my abdominal wall, but I'm not going to tighten the cap of my pelvic floor to get my toothpaste out. Like that just doesn't make any sense. And so when I'm like, well, no, the pelvic floor doesn't push the baby out, it has to let go. They're like, oh, well, we do the Kegels to keep our pelvic floor strong for the postpartum. And I'm like, I don't think that we all understand what strength means. So what I would do instead during pregnancy to help prepare my pelvic floor for birth, because the bridges can be a pelvic floor exercise. Your squats can be pelvic floor exercises. Literally any exercise can be a pelvic floor exercise if you integrate breathing with it. And so as I inhale, I want to think that my pelvic floor is moving down and it's like lengthening and it's it's stretching, like, or I'm finding more length to it. So you kind of think about like a rubber band. I'm like pulling the rubber band. So it's gathering energy so that I can recoil when I exhale to kind of spring back up and support my pelvic organs. So I inhale, I find that length, and then I exhale to contract and lift up. If I'm doing a more passive or restorative exercise, I inhale to find length, and then I exhale to just relax and to let go. And so we can integrate how we breathe to every exercise that we do, and it makes it a pelvic floor exercise because the pelvic floor is an integrated component of our core canister, of our stabilization system. It does not operate in isolation. Just similar to like my bicep, there's really no movement that I do daily that is just my bicep. Typically, I also need my core to stabilize. I'm moving something with my legs. Like most of our body operates in conjunction with other things. Our pelvic floor is just like that too. So while you can squeeze and tighten your pelvic floor as much as possible, if we're not figuring out how to integrate that with the whole system, which breathing is a really great way to do that, we're going to have a dysfunctional pelvic floor that is not going to be able to yield and to let go, but is also not going to function well during pregnancy and into the postpartum. So I don't love Kegels. I don't think people do them correctly. I also don't think that they're very helpful in general because they don't integrate the system with everything else. So instead of Kegels, because some folks will be like, well, you have to do the isolation exercise before you can do all the integrated stuff so that people can feel the muscle. Well, we can just do that with breathing, with gentle diaphragmatic breathing. Like, well, let's just breathe in a supine position. Let's just breathe in a seated position to isolate it so we can feel how that pelvic floor moves with the core canister, so the deep core system, and then we can add additional movement. So we start maybe in a supine position, and then maybe we do a dead bug where we reach the arm and the leg and we extend them to integrate how I'm moving with my breath. So that would be a way that we can kind of expand on those pelvic floor movements. In addition to, like I said, the way that your hips are positioned and the way that your pelvis is positioned can impact how your pelvic floor can work. And so if we are always favoring this externally rotated position, this open hip position, the pelvis is going to shift in a way to where the back half of the pelvis is going to decrease in space. And so the pelvic floor is attached to the pelvis, which means the back half of the pelvic floor is going to be tighter. It's going to be shortened while the front half finds a little bit more length. So if you feel like there's more pressure to the front half of your pelvic floor when you do your deep squats, so you're doing like a deep a deep squat hold, you may find that you feel more pressure to the front half, like more to the vaginal area. That's because those deep, wide knee positions are going to stretch more of the front half of the pelvic floor and put a little bit more pressure to the front. There's also a little bit less structure to the front half of your pelvis and to the pelvic floor. If we can find the opposite, where we find a little bit more of those closed hip positions, more of the internally rotated positions, so like knees in, ankles out. So like hero's pose is a really great example. The revolved lunges, even with like crescent lunge, like you can probably find some closed hip positions within that. Those are going to help to kind of open up that back half of the pelvis, stretch the pelvic floor, create more space between the pelvic halves and the sacrum, and we're going to release tension back there. So if you have issues with constipation, if you're having issues with tailbone pain, maybe SI joint pain, these are all signs that the back half of your pelvic floor is probably a little bit tight. And again, this is going to potentially impact one, can your baby enter into your pelvis? If the back half of the pelvic floor is really tight, it's going to pull that sacrum forward and push your baby forward so they kind of overlap the pubic bone. So now they're having a hard time entering into the pelvis. If they do get into the pelvis, as they rotate, if we can't release the sacrum and we can't release the posterior pelvic floor, it's going to make it really hard for baby to rotate to get underneath the pubic bone because we can't create the space for them. So the pelvic floor is definitely a very important set of muscles within our body. It doesn't operate in isolation though. It's going to be moving with a system. So deep breathing is like a really great way to learn how to move our pelvic floor, and then integrate that breathing with movement. So as I squat, I inhale at the top or inhale as I lower. And then as I come up, I exhale to lift up in the pelvic floor to counter the increase in pressure from exertion. And then kind of continuing with that with the movement. As I extend my arm overhead, I exhale to lift my pelvic floor. As I lower it down, I inhale to find length. So we can use breathing as a much more effective way to move our pelvic floor, to strengthen it, to have it move well over a range of motion. When it comes to like stretches that we can do, different types of movements that we can do, remembering that the pelvic floor attaches to the pelvic bones. So different hip positions are going to stretch different portions of the pelvic floor. So can we find more external rotation on both sides? So open hip positions on both sides. Can we find asymmetrical movement? So one leg externally rotated, one internally rotated, open and closed hip position. Can we find more internal rotation on both sides? Knees and ankles out. Those are going to help to target different portions of our pelvic floor. Remembering that a lot of us tend to favor more of those open positions. So back half of the pelvic floor is probably going to have a little bit more tension. And so there's going to be this need to integrate more of the closed hip and internally rotated positions to help, one, improve pelvic floor function, but two, also to help us navigate our labors a little bit easier.
I love that you talked about internal rotation because yoga doesn't tend to favor that. In fact, that was one of my things when I talked to non-prenatal teachers about some of the mistakes they make not knowing they're making mistakes is so much yoga is external rotation. That's what everyone thinks is hip opening. They don't think about all 6 directions of the hip. So we've made up a lot of internal rotation poses. I have what I call Deb's pyramid, where we're standing up and we have the feet internally rotated, kind of doing like a down dog spine, but the legs are wide. And we're always looking for ways, because I'm really connecting what you were saying about that posterior pelvic floor. And a lot of people are tail tuckers, and that's also going to tighten it. So thank you for highlighting the importance of that internal rotation. I think most of our bodies aren't used to it. We need it during labor. So this leads us into one of my favorite topics, biomechanics of the pelvis. Those that take class with me will know that I teach with 2 different pelvises next to me, and one we can show the bony movements and one is more pelvic floor. So I love the biomechanics of the pelvis. So will you break that down a little bit more and how you would train pelvic mobility?
So with the pelvis, there's 4 main movements that I recommend someone be able to do. And it's important to be able to do this during pregnancy so that these movement patterns are accessible to you during labor. It's really hard to like learn something new in the middle of a contraction. So if you're familiar with these movement patterns prenatally, this is where our prenatal fitness can be super helpful, the better it's going to be for your labor. So the first one is going to be finding more of that external hip rotation. So both knees are out with abduction. So legs moving apart from one another. So we have wider knees, maybe ankles in, knees out. This is going to be really helpful to creating more space in the top part of the pelvis. So that movement helps to create more space side to side in the top part. And it's important to note that there is no one movement that opens the whole pelvis. Different types of movement patterns will create different types of opening within the pelvic structure. So there's no one movement that opens the entire thing. One movement that opens one may close a different part of your pelvis. And so we need to be able to create all sorts of type of space. So those wider knees are going to create more space in the top of the pelvis. In addition to hip movement and kind of how the pelvis and hips are oriented towards one another, the rib cage positioning and the spine positioning also can impact how the pelvis can open as well. And so for the top of the pelvis, we need a lot of front to back spinal mobility. So being able to find a more extended or arched position can help change the pubic bone angle. It also makes it easier for us to find wider knee positions, and that can help baby maybe engage or drop into the pelvis. But we also need the opposite, where we have that more tucked and rounded position, that posterior pelvic tilt, because this is going to help to move the top part of the sacrum, the junction between the sacrum and the lumbar spine backwards, to create more space front to back to allow baby to drop into the pelvis as well. So it's like a combination of rocking from front to back with wider knees is going to help baby enter into the pelvis. The good news is the anterior pelvic tilt, so the arch position, and the wide knees are really easy to find during pregnancy. These are really common postural tendencies for us. And so that's going to be pretty easy. Now, the opposite with that posterior tilt, that tucking underneath, sometimes it's a little bit more challenging during pregnancy. So focusing on releasing your lat musculature, your hip flexors are going to be really helpful to improving that spinal mobility. The next part of the pelvis is the middle of the pelvis, and this is where we need that asymmetrical movement. And there's two types of asymmetrical movement that we need to do. We need internal and external hip rotation, and we need internal and external pelvic rotation. And the difference between the two is what is the anchor point. With hip rotation, the pelvis is the anchor point, and the leg is what's moving around. So if you're kind of pointing your toes in, you're pointing your toes out, the femur is what is moving. That's going to be hip rotation. Really important to be able to do. Be able to find an externally rotated position and an internally rotated hip position. So if you are familiar with a shin box flow where one leg is externally rotated, the other is internally rotated, those would be great movements to incorporate. I call them a 90-90, and there's so many different things that you can do. Windshield wipering the legs would be internal to external rotation. But we also need pelvic rotation. And pelvic rotation is the femur is the anchor point, and the pelvis is what is rotating on the femur. And this is a little bit different. This is going to be more of those open and closed hip positions. So belly comes more towards the thigh, and then belly moves away from the thigh. So with a closed hip position, this is going to be what I refer to, or what people refer to as a hip shift. It's not, I didn't make it up. We have a hip shift, and this is going to help to stretch more of the posterior pelvic floor. This is stretching more of the glute musculature, maybe even into the hamstring. While those open hip positions are going to be stretching more of the inner thigh, the groin type area. We need a combination of those four types of movements. So being able to find the asymmetrical positions with hip rotation and the asymmetrical positions with pelvic rotation are going to be really helpful to creating space in the middle part of the pelvis. With those ones, if you were in labor or were thinking of positions that you can do, swaying from side to side is really great. If we wanted more of the external rotation with the hip, elevated lunges, if we wanted more internal pelvic rotation, more of the hip shifted movements during labor. And then during pregnancy, you can incorporate movements that have those similar open to closed hip positions or external to internal rotation. There is a little bit of mixing with the two as well. So as long as you are finding movements that are more open and then more closed on one-sided, it's going to be really helpful for you. I like to really do it with lunges or single leg movements, where at the bottom of the movement where I have more hip flexion, so more bend in my leg and my hip, my belly comes towards the thigh. So we have more of the internal rotation at that point. And then as I extend in my leg, I have more external rotation. Because with external rotation, we have more glute activation. And so when we extend in the hip, we can kind of complement the two. So that's how we integrate it a lot within our programming. The very bottom of the pelvis is going to open more with internal hip rotation, internal pelvic rotation. So essentially the hips are rotating inward. So knees and ankles out is a big one. I think I've heard folks refer to it as knees and calves out, like Kiko. Everyone's got everyone's describing the same thing, just using their own like catchphrases. This is going to help to create more space in the bottom part of the pelvis, in addition to a slight posterior pelvic tilt. So tucking the butt underneath. Having a more rounded position makes internal rotation easier to achieve. And so if you're in a really extended position, it's not about how well you can torque your hip. We want there to be change within the pelvis. And so finding a slight rounding in your back and then knees in, ankles out can help to create a little bit more space. And so for our listeners, or even for you as you are listening to me talk, if you are in a seated position and you find more of an arch in your back, and then you try to bring your knees together and spread your ankles apart, you probably feel a little bit more of like a strain in the low back. And then if you find a rounded position, it's probably much easier to sink into it. Again, this relates to your spinal position, really playing a big role in how well your pelvis and your hips can move. And so with all of the hip movements, we also need to be thinking about how well does our spine move as well. And so this is where, again, that twisting motions come in, the lateral bending motions come in addition to the front to back movement of the spine. So just as a refresher for the pelvic mechanics, top of the pelvis, just think wider knees. Open positions are going to create more space in the top. We make it to the middle of the pelvis, asymmetrical movement. So open to closed hip positions, external to internal rotation, and kind of alternating between the sides. This helps with baby's rotation. With that part, having lots of spinal rotation and lateral side bending and side body openers can be really great. And then for the bottom of the pelvis, we have knees in, ankles out with a little bit more of a tuck underneath to make internal rotation a little bit easier.
And of course, if you're wondering if I'm doing all this as you're speaking, I am. I'm sitting here untucking my pelvis. I'm twisting, I'm side bending. So I wonder if other people listening to are doing the same. Okay.
I hope so.
I hope so. Because as I was sitting here twisting, I'm like, oh, this feels so good. Especially because many of us do sit for a while, and side bending is kind of my favorite. All right. So this has been so useful. We're going to take another break. When we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents? And I'm very curious because you've had 4 pregnancies, 4 births. You have been teaching new parents for a long time. So I'm very curious what you're going to come up with. So think about that. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Okay, so we're back. So what is your one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents?
So my biggest advice that I would offer to new and expected parents is, one, whoever you choose to support your pregnancy and your birth, whether it is a medical support person or a non-medical support person, make sure that they respect your ability to make your own decisions, that they're there to offer you the advice that you're seeking, that they're to guide you through this process, but they don't feel like they know better than you. They are the experts in the things that they offer for you, but you're still the expert in yourself. And so whoever you are choosing to support your pregnancy, your birth, postpartum, you should feel doesn't judge you and fully supports you in your decision-making authority. And I think when we can do that, it really helps us to have a more empowered experience throughout the entire time. The other thing is like, I know in this episode, I talked a lot about like, oh, you have to do it like this and this movement and that movement. It gets really overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff that like to know. And it's really, and even for myself in between all my pregnancies, the more I learned, the easier it was to move my body. There isn't like an intuitiveness within you as well, where you're going to be able to explore and know that certain things feel better for you than others, and really lean into that and trust that you are the expert in yourself and you are the expert in your own pregnancy and your birth and your postpartum experience. And it's okay if you don't have like the really depth understanding of why this feels good for you. Just lean into the fact that you do know what is best for you and what feels good for you. And you don't have to have like this deep explanation of why. Just really like follow it and trust it.
As someone that thinks about mindfulness and mindful movements and embodiment, that really speaks to me. Oh, that was great. Where can people find your work?
So you can find us on social media. We're primarily on Instagram and we're on YouTube at MamasteFit on both of those platforms. That's where we offer a ton of free content. We have daily reels, carousels. We post several times a week on our YouTube channel. We have our own podcast, the MamasteFit podcast. Everything's MamasteFit across all platforms. If you want to explore any of our courses, we do have pre and postnatal fitness programming and childbirth education where we really dive into a lot of this stuff within our programming. We guide you through it so that you don't have to try to figure it out yourself. You can find all of that on our website at mamastefit.com. And then I do have a book called Training for Two, which is all about how you can use prenatal fitness to feel strong in your pregnancy, pain-free, and also help you prepare for labor. So you can grab the book Training for Two wherever you buy books. I think primarily online. Amazon is like a really easy place to grab it from. So lots of places to learn from me, free options, paid options. And yeah, I'm happy to support you throughout this entire journey.
Gina, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time and for all of your knowledge and wisdom. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.